On a quiet street where danger should never walk, one woman, two retired canines, and a buried secret are all that stand between peace and chaos. When the masks come off, who will survive the truth? If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. It was a warm evening in spring when Naomi Ellis stood barefoot on the porch of her small house on the edge of Miller Street. The sky glowed in soft orange and pink, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine from her garden. Everything looked peaceful, but Naomi could feel something was not right. Storm, her young German shepherd, sat alert beside her. His eyes moved with every sound, his ears pointed high. On the porch steps, Ember lay quietly. She was older, a Labrador mix with a calm presence. Ember didn't move much these days, but when she did, it was for a reason. Naomi looked down the street. It was empty, quiet like most nights in her neighborhood. She took a sip of tea, her hand brushing Storm's fur. Her other hand stayed near the leather belt that once held her police badge. She was no longer on the force. 2 years ago, she had walked away from the job. Not because she was tired of helping people, but because she had seen too much. Too much silence when voices should have spoken up. Too many closed doors when justice knocked. Now she worked as a safety coordinator for the community. She ran a self-defense group at the town center and taught kids about how to stay safe. Most people thought she had left danger behind. Naomi knew better. Storm growled, low and sharp. Ember lifted her head. Naomi's fingers tightened around her mug. "What is it?" she whispered. Storm didn't look at her. He stared at the road, where a distant sound now reached her ears. The rumble of engines. She placed her mug down. Her heart didn't race, not yet, but her body stood still like the wind had stopped around her. Storm stood up. Ember followed, slower, but her eyes never left the growing noise. Headlights broke through the quiet. 3 motorcycles rolled into view, moving slowly, like predators sizing up their prey. The men riding them wore dark jackets, helmets hiding their faces. They didn't speak, but they didn't need to. Their presence was loud enough. The bikes stopped at the edge of Naomi's driveway. Storm barked once, short, controlled. Ember stepped closer to Naomi, who took a slow step forward. The man in front removed his helmet. His hair was short, his eyes cold and steady. He gave a crooked smile. "Evening, Miss Ellis," he said, his voice smooth but filled with trouble. "Nice night for a chat." Naomi knew him. Blake Rowan. Local troublemaker. She had arrested him once, years ago, for illegal street racing and running protection schemes. He had a reputation for charm and cruelty in equal measure. "Not much to chat about," Naomi replied. Her voice was calm, her feet planted strong. "You're on private property," Blake chuckled. "We're just out for a ride. Saw your light on. Thought maybe you'd like some company." Ember's soft growl filled the pause between their words. Storm was already a step ahead, blocking Naomi's path. "This isn't a good place for games, Blake," Naomi said. "Go home." Blake took a slow step forward. His friends stayed on their bikes, silent and waiting. "I heard you've been helping out some folks," he said. "Teaching self-defense, keeping the peace, that's sweet. But not everyone likes peace, Naomi. Sometimes trouble needs to be reminded who's in charge." Storm snarled, a sharp warning that made the other riders shift uneasily. Naomi's hands stayed steady. "And you came to remind me?" Blake's smile faded. "Just a friendly visit." Naomi didn't move. "I remember your version of friendly. Last time someone ended up in the hospital." He raised his hand slightly. "Accidents happen." Storm barked again. Louder this time. A single bark, but it echoed down the street. Blake looked at the dog, then at Naomi. "Still got your little guard dogs, huh?" he said. Naomi nodded slowly. "They're not just dogs, Blake. They're trained, and they don't like threats." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "What if I said I was here to test them?" Naomi's face stayed calm. Her eyes didn't blink. "Then I'd say that would be your last mistake." The two stared at each other, neither one backing down. Storm growled again, and Ember stepped to Naomi's other side. The air was heavy, thick with silence and tension. Finally, Blake laughed. Not a real laugh, but something bitter and forced. "Maybe next time," he said, stepping back. "Enjoy your evening, Miss Ellis." He put on his helmet, nodded to the others, and the three bikes roared to life. They turned around slowly and disappeared down the road, the sound fading into the distance. Naomi waited until it was quiet again. Then she looked down at her dogs. "Good work," she whispered. Storm sat again, ears still alert. Ember looked up at her, calm but focused. Naomi knew this wasn't over. Tonight was a warning, and she was ready. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of Naomi's kitchen as she poured herself a cup of coffee. The steam rose slowly, dancing in the quiet air. Storm lay by the back door, his eyes half closed but still alert. Ember rested under the table, her soft breathing calm and steady. Naomi hadn't slept much. The visit from Blake Rowan still echoed in her mind. Something about the way he stood there, unbothered and confident, told her this wasn't just about old grudges. This was something deeper. She sat down and pulled out her phone. She scrolled through her messages until she found the one she needed, a contact she hadn't used in almost a year. David Shiro, a retired detective. Once her mentor, now living in quiet retreat a few towns over. She sent him a short message. "Need to talk. It's important." Less than 5 minutes later, he replied, "Come by before noon. I'll be waiting." Naomi looked at Storm and Ember. "We're taking a trip," she said softly. An hour later, they were on the road. The city faded behind them, replaced by trees, hills, and the quiet sounds of birdsong. David lived in a cabin near Pine Ridge, surrounded by woods and peace. He always said it was the only place where the world made sense anymore. When Naomi pulled up to his driveway, David was already outside, leaning on his cane, wearing an old brown jacket. His eyes lit up when he saw her, but his smile was brief. "You look tired," he said. "I am," Naomi replied. "You might not like what I'm bringing." "I usually don't," he muttered, stepping aside. "Come in." They sat at his kitchen table, coffee between them. Storm lay by the fireplace while Ember wandered the edges of the room, sniffing gently. "Tell me everything," David said. Naomi told him about Blake, the bikers, the threats, and the way Storm and Ember had sensed the danger before anything was even said. She also mentioned how calm Blake had been, how sure of himself. He wasn't just flexing muscle, she said. He was testing something. David nodded slowly. "You're right. That kind of confidence means he's got people behind him. Strong people." He stood and walked over to a drawer, pulling out a folder. "There's been whispers about Blake's crew getting tied up with something bigger. Not just local trouble anymore. Someone's been buying silence in city council, even a few folks in law enforcement." "Any names?" Naomi asked. "Not yet," David replied. "But someone does." He handed her a slip of paper. It had a name and a number. Claire Menon, reporter. Works for the Evening Post. "She's been chasing a story that lines up with what you're describing. Gang movements, corruption, secret meetings in warehouses. I trust her, but she's careful. You'll have to gain her trust." Naomi folded the paper. "I'll reach out today." Before she left, David looked her in the eye. "Be careful," he said. "This is bigger than one street, and you're not in uniform anymore." Naomi smiled faintly. "I don't need a badge to protect people." The drive back into town was quiet. The dogs didn't make a sound, but Naomi could tell they were uneasy. Storm kept turning toward the window, his body tense. Ember didn't sleep like usual. As they turned into their street, Naomi slowed the car. She saw it immediately, a scratch mark near her mailbox. It looked like nothing, but to her trained eyes it meant something, a sign. Someone had been here, watching. She parked quickly and circled the house. Nothing broken, nothing missing, but she didn't like the silence. Back inside, she took a breath and pulled out her phone. She dialed the number David had given her. Claire. Menon, said the voice on the other end. My name's Naomi Ellis, she said. A friend of David Shiro. He said you might want to talk. There was a pause. Then Claire said, What do you know about the Black Sun warehouse? Nothing, Naomi replied, but I'm guessing I should. Meet me at the library on Harper Street, basement level. Come alone. Naomi looked at her dogs. I never travel without Storm and Ember. Claire hesitated, then said, Then come quiet. They already know you're involved. The line went dead. Naomi exhaled slowly. So much for a quiet retirement. The sun had dipped by the time she reached the old library. It looked closed from the outside. Inside it was even quieter, dust floating in the warm light. She found the basement door unlocked and stepped carefully down the stairs. Storm and Ember followed, their bodies close to her legs. Claire was already there, sitting behind a long table filled with folders. She was younger than Naomi expected, with sharp eyes and a voice that didn't waver. You stirred the nest, Claire said. They've been watching you since last week. They marked your street. Naomi sat down. Who are they? Claire opened a folder, showing photos. Warehouse meetings, shadowy figures, trucks without plates. It's not just Blake's gang. It's a network. People in suits fund the work. People like Blake run the streets, and they use quiet neighborhoods like yours to move things around unnoticed. She slid a photo across the table. Naomi stared at it. The same motorcycles from her driveway. Behind them was a man in a dark coat, face partly turned. But Naomi knew him. That's no street thug, she whispered. That's Councilman Rayburn. Claire nodded. This goes deeper than you think, she said. And they're just getting started. The wind picked up as Naomi left the library. Dusk was settling over the city and shadows stretched long across the sidewalk. Storm and Ember walked close to her, their steps quiet and steady. She didn't say a word on the way back to the car. Her mind was too full. Claire's words repeated in her head. This wasn't just about one gang. There was a whole system working behind closed doors. And now she had a name to go with the face. Councilman Rayburn. A man who stood in front of cameras, smiling and promising to keep the city safe, while behind the scenes he was helping dangerous people grow more powerful. Back at home, Naomi sat at the kitchen table and stared at the photo of Rayburn. Ember rested under her feet while Storm sat at the door, watching the street. Naomi picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. This is Lucas, said a tired voice. Lucas Kendry. It's Naomi Ellis. A long pause followed. Then, I didn't think I'd hear from you again. I need your help, Naomi said. I have a lead on something big, something involving Rayburn, and I think you're the only one who can get close. Lucas sighed. You know I'm still working undercover, right? That's why I called. They met later that night in an abandoned parking lot near the old train station. Lucas arrived on foot, wearing a hooded jacket and moving like someone who didn't want to be seen. He was taller than Naomi remembered, and his eyes were sharper. Storm stayed close to Naomi. Ember sat in the back seat of the car, watching. So, what's the story? Lucas asked. Naomi handed him the photo of Rayburn and the notes Claire had shared. Claire's been tracking a warehouse called Black Sun. It's being used to store weapons and illegal shipments. Blake Rowan's crew is involved, but Rayburn is the one protecting it from the inside. Lucas flipped through the papers. I've heard rumors, he said. The warehouse is locked down tight, cameras, guards, motion sensors. Nobody gets in without a passcode and clearance. Can you get me in? Naomi asked. Lucas looked at her carefully. You're not wearing a badge anymore, remember? I don't need one, she replied. I've got something better. Lucas glanced at Storm, then at Naomi. You're serious about this? Dead serious. Lucas reached into his coat and handed her a small device. This is a scanner. It'll pick up the signal from the warehouse's security system. I'll meet you tomorrow night near the south loading dock. We'll only have one chance. Naomi nodded. Understood. The next evening came quickly. Naomi dressed in dark clothes, her gear packed carefully in a small bag. Storm and Ember were ready, their vests secured, their eyes focused. She checked her phone. A message from Lucas blinked on the screen. Ready when you are. They met just outside the Black Sun warehouse. It stood tall and silent, surrounded by a fence and shadow. 2 guards walked the perimeter. A red light blinked above the gate. Lucas crouched behind a stack of crates and waved her over. "We go when the guards turn the corner," he whispered. Naomi gave a quiet signal to Storm and Ember. The dogs moved low to the ground, perfectly trained, waiting for her command. As the guards disappeared around the far side, Lucas tapped a code into the scanner. The gate clicked open with a soft beep. They slipped inside. Inside the warehouse, the air was cold and smelled of oil and dust. Crates were stacked high along the walls. A few lights glowed dimly overhead. Lucas led the way, moving with practiced care. Naomi stayed close, her dogs flanking her. "The office is on the 2nd level," Lucas said quietly. "That's where they keep the files." As they climbed the metal stairs, Naomi's ears picked up a noise. Footsteps. Someone else was nearby. "Someone's coming," she whispered. They ducked behind a stack of boxes. A man in a black suit walked past, talking softly on a phone. "Shipment arrives Friday," the man said. "Rayburn wants everything cleared before the next vote." Naomi clenched. Her jaw. She had heard enough. Once the man passed, they continued to the office. Lucas picked the lock in seconds. Inside, papers and folders covered the desk. A wall safe sat behind a painting. Naomi searched quickly, pulling files and snapping photos with her phone. Names, accounts, business ties. It was all there. Suddenly, a voice behind them spoke. "You think you're clever?" They turned to see Blake Rowan standing in the doorway holding a gun. His smile was full of hate. "I knew someone was poking around. Just didn't expect you, Naomi," Storm growled, teeth bared. Ember stepped forward slowly. "Put the gun down," Naomi said. "Or what?" Blake laughed. "Your dogs are gonna fetch." Before he could finish the sentence, Storm lunged. The gun fired once, loud, sharp, but the bullet hit the wall. Storm tackled Blake, knocking him off his feet. Ember was close behind, grabbing the man's arm and holding tight. Naomi rushed forward, kicking the gun away and grabbing her cuffs. Lucas stared, amazed. "Those dogs just saved your life." "They always do," Naomi said. With Blake secured and the files in hand, Naomi knew the mask was finally off. Rayburn, Blake, and whoever else was behind this, their time was almost up. But the real fight was just beginning. Rain tapped gently on the windows of Naomi's safe house as she sat at the table, files spread out in front of her. Storm and Ember rested nearby, quiet but alert. Her hands were steady, but her thoughts moved quickly. The evidence she and Lucas had gathered from the warehouse was enough to shake the roots of the city's power. Names, dates, payments, and secret meetings. Everything was connected. Councilman Rayburn, Blake Rowan, even business owners who smiled in public while hiding dangerous secrets. Naomi leaned back in her chair. She had taken down gangs before. She had chased criminals into dark corners. But this time the darkness reached further than she ever imagined. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was Claire. "They know you have the files," Claire said quickly. "They've called an emergency meeting tonight. Pier 31. They're going to move the rest of their shipments and disappear." Naomi stood. "Then we stop them tonight." "Not alone," Claire warned. "You'll need help." Naomi already had someone in mind. Within an hour, she met Lucas at an old storage yard on the edge of town. He was loading equipment into a black van when she arrived. "Got your message," he said. "I'm in." "This is the last chance to catch them all together," Naomi said. "If they disappear tonight, we may never get another shot." Lucas nodded. "Then let's end it." Storm jumped into the back of the van without being told. Ember followed, slower but focused. They both seemed to know what was coming. As they neared the docks, the city grew quieter. The streets emptied. The pier was lit by only a few scattered lights, and the smell of salt water hung heavy in the air. Lucas parked near a line of shipping containers. They moved on foot from there, sticking to the shadows. Storm and Ember moved low to the ground, their training taking over. From behind a stack of crates, Naomi saw them. A group of men loading boxes into trucks. Rayburn stood at the edge, speaking to another man in a suit. A small boat waited at the dock, engine running. "They're leaving by water," Lucas whispered. "Not if we stop them first," Naomi replied. She pulled out her radio and signaled Claire, who was waiting with backup. "Not far away. We're in place." "Give us 5 minutes," Claire said. "Make it 3, Naomi replied. Storm gave a low growl. His ears turned toward a noise. Someone was approaching from behind. Naomi turned just in time to see a guard walking toward them, flashlight swinging. She gave a quick hand signal. Storm darted forward, silent as a shadow. Before the guard could shout, Storm leapt, knocking the man to the ground. Naomi tied his hands and moved on. They circled around the loading area. The rain began to fall harder, masking their footsteps. As they reached the edge of the truck line, Naomi stepped into view, her voice loud and clear. "Drop your weapons. The game is over." The men turned, startled. Rayburn's face went pale. "You," he said. "How did you—" "We have everything," Naomi said. "You're finished." One of the men reached for his gun. Storm barked once. Ember stepped forward, teeth bared. Lucas raised his own weapon. "Don't try it." Sirens echoed in the distance. Flashing lights appeared through the fog. Claire had arrived with the police. The scene turned to chaos. Some of the men tried to run. Others raised their hands. Rayburn didn't move. He just stood there, shoulders sinking. As officers moved in to make arrests, Naomi walked up to Rayburn. "You lied to everyone," she said, "but you never fooled the ones who pay attention." He looked at her, broken and tired. "This city will replace me." "Then we'll be ready," Naomi replied. The cleanup took hours. The trucks were seized. The files confirmed everything. It was over, but not for Naomi. A few days later, she stood in front of the town center. A small crowd had gathered for the reopening of the community safety program. Children lined up to meet Storm and Ember, now local heroes. "You saved a lot of people," Claire said, joining her. "So did you," Naomi replied. Lucas stepped over with a smile. "Looks like you're back in the fight." Naomi shook her head. "Not back, just choosing a new way to help." The crowd clapped as a local artist unveiled a statue at the edge of the garden. It showed a woman standing with 2 dogs beside her, strong, alert, loyal. Naomi smiled as she read the plaque. "To those who stand watch when others sleep, loyalty never fades." Storm sat beside her, tail wagging gently. Ember lay at her feet, calm and proud. Naomi reached down and patted them both. "You were always more than partners," she whispered. "You were my courage." And as the sun rose behind them, Naomi knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end. It was just a new beginning.